Before we begin, I would just like to state for the record that today is November 10th, 2021, and my name is Ben Bauman. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana with Jesse Villalpando, and we are doing an interview for the Indiana Legislative Oral History Initiative. So just starting off, when and where were you born?
My name is Jesse Villalpando. I was born on July 4th, 1959 in East Chicago, Indiana.
All right, and what were your parents' names?
My father's Jesse. I was Jesse Michael. He was plain old Jess, as he went. And my mother's name is Rose. Her maiden name was Oria. Both parents were born in East Chicago, Indiana as well.
Okay, and where was your family from before Indiana?
Well, again, Mom and Dad graduated from East Chicago, Washington High School. So they were born and raised in Indiana Harbor in East Chicago. My grandmother on my father's side was born in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And she left as part of the revolution.
Wow.
Down there in Mexico. My grandmother on my mom's side was born in Texas.
Okay.
Laredo, Texas. And then my grandfathers unfortunately passed away in the year I was born.
Okay, yeah.
So I never met them that I could recall.
Sure.
And so I don't know as much about them other than the fact, they worked in East Chicago.
Yeah.
But in terms of their history, I don't know too much of my grandfather's history because they were never part of my
Right.
a practical life.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting, though. Okay. What were your parents' occupations?
My father was a steel worker, a welder at Inland Steel. He worked for 38 years at Inland, and then toward the end of his career there, he went back to school.
Yeah.
He first got a bachelor's degree in business, thinking that he would go into management upon retiring as a welder. Then the late 1970s happened, and the steel mills downsized dramatically. It was a horrendous time for us in the steel industry up there in Northwest Indiana. So then he actually, after he got his bachelor's degree, he went back to school at Indiana University Northwest in Gary and got an education degree.
Okay.
So when he did retire from the mill in 1988, he taught in the East Chicago public schools for 10 years. And so that was really, a dream of his to be able to go back to the community he was raised in and teach. He taught in the junior high and 1 year in high school. Didn't feel comfortable there, so he came back to junior high to get his 10 years in.
Wow, okay. That's interesting.
And my mother was a classic stay-at-home mom, full-time homemaker, a wonderful mother. The core support of the family. Thankfully, she's healthy today.
Yeah.
She is 87. Unfortunately, my dad passed away 6 months after he retired from teaching. So very sadly, and then we'll be marking it'll be 23 years now come January.
Oh my gosh.
Just passing.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
Yes. I have three living sisters, two of which live in the Marion County area.
Oh, okay.
And one of which is in Lake County. My oldest sister sadly passed away when I was a little boy. She was just barely over a year. And so I have memories of her. But we lost, my mom and dad lost her, we lost her, and she's only in my memory.
Right, sure. Looking back at your childhood, how would you describe it overall?
I had a wonderful childhood.
Yeah.
My father was a strict disciplinarian. I didn't like it growing up, but it took a few years to recognize his methods. He was from the military. He was a Marine Corps corporal, and he raised us as if we were in the military regime, but he knew what he was doing, and I'm grateful for the discipline, he was I was very active in all kind of, sports, and I took a particular interest in magic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was a major part of my life, really, through, junior high, high school, college, even in law school.
Yeah.
I was widely known, at the Indiana University campus for my magician skills.
Wow, okay.
And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. So that really was my single largest endeavor beyond sports, because I think I was a better magician than I was an athlete.
Okay. Sure, that's cool. All right. Who would you say were the most influential people in your childhood?
Well, my dad, clearly,
Yeah.
okay, was very, very influential. And again, my mom, I understood that, I always had to stay on keel with my mother. If at all I got out of whack with her, almost immediately when I stepped out of the house, things didn't go right. So at least I learned that early on,
Right.
that I always have to be, in good sync with my mom, and that's been the secret of, I think, how I've been able to, have a happy life, because
Sure.
I could always go back home. She always said, 917, just 2 blocks from where I live, or we live, is where my mom still lives. And so they were clearly the biggest influences in my life. I always say, though, I grew up at Indiana University. Because of the fact that my parents were so conservative, and so I led a kind of a sheltered life.
Yeah.
With under great discipline. I didn't really have freedom until I went to Bloomington in 1977, and then wow. Okay?
Yeah. Yes. How was that adjustment? Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay. And I still say to this day, as much as I have only good things about my home in Griffith, I grew up in Bloomington. Those were the 4 greatest years of my life.
Yeah.
As an undergraduate, and my mentors, of course, were the just wonderful professors at IU, that just turned my life into an academic life, because until then I kind of like skated through school. I just didn't put the effort into it, and I realized early on in Bloomington that if I had continued that kind of mentality of just skating through school, I wouldn't last a semester over there.
Yeah.
And so I started actually behind. I noticed, but I wanted to succeed. So I really literally flicked the switch and buckled down, and I caught up, and then I did very well down in Bloomington from an undergraduate, and but those were the 4 best years of my life. So all of my professors, or most of them, were heavy influences on my career development, and and then later, of course, once I got into politics, I had mentors, but we could probably talk about that in a few minutes.
Yeah. Sure. What did you major in at Bloomington?
I started as a telecommunications major.
Okay.
My sports interest led me to want to be a sportscaster.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure.
And I took the intro class as a freshman. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I learned immediately that you because time in the studio was so precious, and the interest was so high in telecommunications at that time, 1977, that you couldn't get any studio or production classes until you were a junior. So I would have been taking 2 years of courses without any exposure to what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I just made a decision early on to say, I don't want to wait that long.
Yeah.
Okay. So my father was involved in politics. He was a precinct committeeman in the Lake County Democratic Party. So I started in political science after I decided not to do the telecommunications, and then I found a course from a buddy of mine of forensic studies. They had no idea what forensics were until I took the intro course, and a guy named Hilliard Truitt, who was just a peach of a man down in Bloomington, he just struck a chord.
Yeah.
And, he was one of my favorite people, not just professors. He was down to earth. He wasn't a scholar, but he was certainly a pragmatic person, and he was just a wonderful man. And I majored in forensics primarily based on the intro class, and I think I know I enjoyed those classes tremendously. And I also took a lot of psychology classes. In fact, I had a double major, and I would have had a triple major with a third being psychology, but for one course.
Okay.
I didn't take the stats course.
Okay.
Because Great Point was the name of the game down there, and I'm not a mathematics guy.
Yeah.
And so, I could have had the triple major, but I just shied away from that stats class. But the benefit of all those psychology classes, those classes, I think, had a greater impact than any of the political science or forensics psychology, because you're dealing with, in your career, people, and so much of what I learned in the classroom, was able to apply, to the real world.
Yeah, it sounds
psychology.
Sounds like you had a really good education that you found incredibly applicable later on in your career. So
yeah, I've make a long story short. When I went to law school was a whole different can of worms.
Sure.
That was not part of the 4 greatest years of my life.
I bet.
That was the most difficult thing I've ever been involved in. But when I was a judge after I moved from the legislature to the judiciary, I could say that I never considered going to work, because every day on the bench I applied what I learned at the IU School of Law.
Yeah.
So it wasn't work. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So even though I struggled like everyone did in law school, or like most people did, I know I gained so much experience and knowledge. And again, I had some unbelievable professors at the IU Law School, and I applied what they taught me, sometimes to my detriment.
Yeah.
But I certainly believed in all the principles that they advocated, and I tried to apply them in my professional life.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So you mentioned your father's involvement in politics. So what understanding did you have about your family's political beliefs growing up?
Well, my dad was elected precinct committeeman when I was, I think, in the 4th grade.
Okay.
And he challenged one of the local power brokers in the county. And most people did not give him a chance to win. But my dad was from East Chicago, and there it's a very politicized city.
Yeah.
And so he grew up understanding the nuts and bolts. And because he was young, he was able to campaign door to door, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew everyone in his precinct, and he won his first election by 4 votes.
Wow.
So that had a powerful impact on me, how just that small number of votes could determine not just his path in life, but my arc of my life was going back to that first election when I was in 4th grade. So it had a huge impact on me. So my involvement with my father was simply as a typical kid. He would ask me to hand out materials, and I would enlist some of my buddies from down the street, and he would pay us 25 cents or 50 cents a block, to hand the materials out. But I also remember him taking me to some of the political events where I remember Hubert Humphrey came in from Washington when he may still have been vice president. He gave a big speech at the Hammond Civic Center that still I can visualize. And of course, I met our then Congressman Ray J. Madden at a pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
And I remember, must have been just 8 or 10 years old, and he was a big, tall guy, and but I was so impressed by him because he gave everyone the time and attention at the moment that you were before him.
Right.
He wasn't focused on what was going on around. So that was a very important moment, and I can still visualize it in the basement of our church when I met the congressman for the first time, the only time I think as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, those experiences can really make an impact. What views did you have about the state of Indiana or about being someone from Indiana as a child?
Well, you got to remember, I was born in East Chicago. We moved to Griffith, which was a small prairie type community
Okay.
in 1963. We were the fifth house on the block, and everything north of us was just prairies. So it was, even though the town had been there for probably 35, 40 years, everything was built south.
Okay.
And so, we were like the fifth house from the main drag, and so everything north of that was brand new. So it was a big difference from going from East Chicago, which is a little city,
Yeah.
a dense city,
Yeah.
okay, to Griffith being, wow, this is a country.
Yeah.
Okay, and I was 4 years old when we moved to Griffith. Now, what was the question again?
Oh, I was just asking about what views you had about the state of Indiana and living there.
Okay, my point, the reason I bring that up is because we can get into the details, but the state of lake mentality, okay, is like, we know we're different. I didn't grow up a Hoosier until I went to Bloomington.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying Bloomington was such a major impact in my life.
Yeah.
Because not until then did I consider myself a Hoosier.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? I'm from Lake County, all right? The region,
Yeah.
right? And we're oriented to Chicago,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So I didn't feel, it said Indiana, Griffith, Indiana, but Griffith, Lake County,
Yeah.
period,
Yeah.
until I went to Bloomington.
So it kind of sounds like then you really felt like you're part of the Chicago network instead of the Indiana
No
network.
question about
Yeah.
it. No question about it. Yeah.
And how did that shape your just sort of your worldview then, going from there to Bloomington, where it's totally different?
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like going from a city to a pastoral, setting.
Yeah.
Right? And it was a shock. Okay? It was beautiful.
Right.
I knew within 1 week in Bloomington I was in the greatest place on earth.
Okay. Wow.
Heaven.
Yeah.
Right? But it was a shock.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And so, I was a Mayor Richard J. Daley fan. Okay, I remember reading a book by a guy named Mike Royko, who was a writer for the Sun Times, who was not a Daley fan, and he wrote a book called Boss.
Okay.
Okay, and I read that. It's a little paperback book. It kind of reminded me when I later got to college. If you ever heard of Machiavelli, The Prince is a small, thin book. Okay,
Sure.
The Boss is similar, in size and and depth, and really they're kind of written from the same perspective. Okay, this is not what they teach you at Indiana University or any school. This is how the sausage is really getting made, in a political machine environment. Okay, and so we had moved out of East Chicago, which I later learned is more political than Chicago.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I didn't learn that until down the road.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But you could see that even though you don't know the details. Okay. You get the rhythms of how things operate. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was such a shock to come to Bloomington. Okay. Because it was a different ballgame. Politically and. Just culturally, particularly.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
And one thing Bloomington and the region did share was the diversity. Okay, we're a very diverse community up in Northwest Indiana, and then one of the greatest things about Bloomington is you meet people from all over the world. So that was the one common denominator.
Yeah.
That was that I could draw a link between the region and Southern Indiana.
So how did your experiences at Bloomington affect your political development?
Well, my dad, he didn't push me once I, got out of the house and went to school.
Mm-hmm.
He just demanded that I get good grades,
Okay.
which I did, and then he kind of backed off. I mean, once he saw that I was working hard and producing down there, I always had their support. I always saw my parents as in the corner when I was in the arena. Okay, even in Bloomington, they didn't know what was going on in the day to day.
Yeah.
But I always had their support, and and their support means their financial support, as well as their emotional support, and a lot of emotional support. So they were a factor, throughout my IU career. Again, what was the
Yeah, just asking about how your experiences at Indiana Bloomington affected your political outlook.
Okay, the only politics I did
Mm-hmm.
was my dad would send me an absentee ballot.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I always voted in Lake County.
Yeah.
Right? He would send me an absentee ballot. I would open it up. I would call back home, and he would tell me who to vote for. Okay.
Okay.
And then the next day, I would walk it over to the student union. Okay, they have a mail room at the student union, and I would throw it in the mail, and then I would treat myself to a nice meal in the student union. I just did it. If it was election year, twice. Once in the primary and once in the general. It's the only time I would eat in that restaurant because it was kind of expensive for a college kid.
Yeah.
But I treated myself to a meal after I voted.
Okay.
I felt that was real important to do.
Yeah.
Okay. But I was not active in student government.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't active in any campaigns. Right. I was a student. My dad would call me Joe College, okay, because I just was a classic student, 2 years in the dorms, 2 years in fraternity, and then I graduated in 4 years, and I enjoyed so many aspects of IU, from the academics to the camaraderie, to sports. My senior year in 1981, we won the national title in basketball.
Yeah.
We had a huge, that was like being a king.
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
But even football, which was not nothing to write about, okay,
Right.
Was still an excuse to get together and tailgate and spread out at that stadium, because it was never crowded. You could get a ticket pretty easy for a football game. But it was the camaraderie that was important. But I did not consider myself a political activist. I was a pure student, just totally cream and crimson, Indiana University.
Yeah.
But a classic student.
Yeah.
In other words, I had no responsibility outside of school.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yeah.
So I was like heaven.
Yeah.
For 4 years.
Yeah.
At Bloomington.
Yeah. No, that's kind of like the stereotypical college experience then, and yeah.
Stereotypical college experience. That's
Yeah.
why he called me Joe College.
Yeah. So, describe a little bit about your employment history after college.
Yeah. Well, 38 years ago, in about 3 weeks, November 29th, it was toward the end of the day, and one of my roommates told me a guy named Peter Kadick called, something about a job. All right? I met him one time. I was doing a magic show at a function, and he was a state rep.
Yeah.
And he was there, and he talked afterwards. That was it. Okay?
Yeah.
So when I went back to the house, another roommate says, "Your mom just called. She's very excited." Okay, very excitable. So I was a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
Okay? So I called my mom first, and my mom is excitable. She said, "I just heard it on WJOB radio. You're a candidate for state representative." And I said, she said it not flat like that. Okay?
Right.
She said it excitedly.
Yeah.
And I says, "What did you say?" Remember, I'm in Bloomington.
Yeah.
Late November means finals start the next week, right? I have no idea what she's talking about. When the guy says Pete Katic talking about a job, I knew he was the state rep.
Right.
But he had just been elected judge in Hammond.
Okay.
So he would soon leave the legislature to become judge. I thought, since I'm in my third year of law school, it might be a job related to his new position as judge.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Right.
A law clerk or a public defender, or whatever. I used to work in the prosecutor's office during the summertime. So, remember the first message was to call Pete Katic. So, after I hung up the phone with my mother, I says, "Pete, Mr. Katic, what are you talking about?" And then he says, "Quiet. What do you think?" "What do I think? What are you doing?" Okay? Now, behind the scenes that I didn't know about is my dad was working in the mill.
Yeah.
And they heard they got the radio on over there, okay? And so everyone thought it was him because we got the same last name.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, Pete Katic, without any contact with me, no authorization, no contact with my father, okay? He did it on his own.
What?
He floated my name out on WJOB, a guy named Larry Peterson, who was the midday, radio guy, okay? And then Larry Peterson repeated over and over again every hour that, when Pete Katic retires, there's going to be a Jesse Villalpando from Griffith, Indiana, who's going to run for the seat without talking to us.
What? That's insane.
That's insane.
So, did he ever give a reason why?
Very good. I was going to wait to see if you asked why.
Yeah.
Because he had a reason why.
Okay.
And this is what he said. He was a state rep for 5 years. And he knows how politicized things are. According to Pete, these are Pete's words. He says he didn't want Hatcher, Mayor of Gary, to pick his successor. Okay?
Okay.
He wanted to have some influence in who was going to succeed him. Okay? And not leave it to the political power brokers up in Lake County.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what he told me. All right?
Okay.
But my dad, when he first heard it, wasn't so happy. Okay? Because I'm 24 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No political experience. Remember, I'm a pure student. Right?
Yeah.
And he didn't want me to get chewed up in the grinding of Lake County.
Yeah.
Running a campaign that I didn't know anything about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never had gone to the General Assembly. I never had any exposure beyond what I told you. Hello, Congressman. I enjoyed Hubert Humphrey. Obviously, I was following the 1980 election, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. I remember when Birch Bayh got defeated. Those big events.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? So to go from that to you're a candidate for public office when you're in law school, 200 miles away, okay? For a district in East Chicago, Gary, Hammond, Griffith, 200 miles to the north, right?
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, the next day, Pete was coming down to the state capitol, all right? And he wanted to meet. So I drove up from Bloomington, and we went to the press club across the street from the state capitol. Then it was on the top floor.
Okay.
And it had a beautiful view of the state capitol. Now it's in the basement, okay? I won't forget the second time I met Katie, but I told you the first time. We sat at the top, had a couple drinks. There were a few legislators he introduced me to, and he says, you can win this. And I said, how? Okay? He says when he resigns, and he was there that day to tender his resignation to the governor, okay? And the moment he did that, the clock starts for his replacement. by state statute, 30 days, the Democratic precinct committeemen of the district gather and will elect a successor to fill out his term, okay, an appointed position for that year remaining in term.
Yeah.
And he thought that if you worked it, okay, you can get support. I mean, there was 117 precinct committeemen back then in the 12th district, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like thousands of voters, right? These are all people like my dad.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says, your dad could swing the Griffith vote, okay, and he thought he could swing the Hammond vote, all right. But he also knew that we'd have to go see, Mayor Bob Pastrick in East Chicago and Mayor Hatcher and Gary, okay? And that's when he told me he didn't want Hatcher and Pastrick putting one of their hacks in the legislature, okay? That was his rationale, all right?
Yeah.
Well, I says, Pete, finals exams start next week, okay? I mean, it's not like, I was sitting home doing nothing, right? I was buried in law school.
Yeah.
Right? Fine. And if in law school, it's one exam for each course. That's it.
Yeah.
Everything rides on the exam.
Yep.
There's no quizzes. There's no student participation. One exam determines your whole grade. So you can't have an off day, right?
Yep.
You can't be being out the night before, and taking the exam the next day. No, that doesn't fly in law school.
Right.
How am I going to do this? He wanted to know my exam schedule. I had a fortuitous exam schedule that semester. They covered 2 weeks, and I had an exam on Friday and Saturday, and then Thursday and Friday.
Okay.
So he says, well, here's what you do. You take your exams in your first week, and that's sad after your exam. You go back home, and we're going to make the rounds, and then we're making the rounds until whenever you got to take your next exam on Thursday. And so I took my Friday and Saturday exams, went back home, and my dad still wasn't sold on this.
Yeah.
Okay. Because he said he was afraid that I wasn't going to finish law school.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He says, you got to make me a promise. You got to finish your law degree. And I says, absolutely. And I says, Dad, what I've had to put up with for 2.5 years to get to this point, I will never walk away from. Okay?
Yeah.
It was the most difficult experience of my life. 3 years of law school.
Yeah.
And to not complete it was not going to happen. Okay?
Right.
So once he was convinced that I was going to finish my degree, if I was successful, I would take a leave of absence. Okay. And I would finish. He says, okay, when are you going to file? Wow. He turned like that.
Yeah.
Right. So. First stop was to our city chairman, okay? The second stop was to see Mayor Pastrick, right? In East Chicago. Now, Mayor Pastrick had met me before.
Mm-hmm.
He had met me one time when I was the entertainment, okay? Yeah, this plays a role.
Yeah.
I was performing at the East Chicago Yacht Club.
Okay.
Right on Lake Michigan. And my finale was my 7-foot guillotine, okay? And I needed a volunteer. And I asked Mayor Pastrick, and I'm a senior in high school, okay? In 1977.
Yeah.
Mayor Pastrick is my volunteer. I asked him to kneel down, put his head in the guillotine, right?
Oh my gosh.
And the place is going nuts, okay? And Pastrick had the best line. He says, you don't know how many times people have wanted me to be in this exact position right before the blade comes down, okay? So how could he forget me, right? After that, right?
Yeah.
So we're meeting them for the second time. We're talking about the Magic Act from, what was that, 7 years earlier, right? And he doesn't give me a commitment, okay? Because he wants me to go see Mayor Hatcher.
Okay.
All right? So, okay. So I remember they had an event at the Gary Genesis Center, and I was told to be there at a certain time. Don't be late. And you're going to visit with Mayor Hatcher. And I got there at the appointed time, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited for more than 3 hours. Okay? All right. Finally, when he's finished with this event, okay, he the event was over. He could have taken 5 minutes, right?
Right.
And, while people are eating or whatever. No. I waited for 3 hours. Then he's not alone. He's with our congresswoman.
Okay.
Katie Hall at the time, former senator, had been elected Congress in a similar election in terms of, it wasn't a general election, it was Congressman Adam Benjamin.
Right.
Died in office. And then it was not the precinct committeeman, it was a couple of county chairmen and this, it was a couple of power brokers selected Katie Hall to complete the term. But now in '84, she's up for her own term. So Hatcher wanted to make sure that he was building support for Katie Hall. And so Hatcher was very polite, okay, but very direct, okay? He said, we want to encourage young people, particularly Hispanic, like yourself, Jesse, who are going to school. He said all the right things, right? And we want to help them. And I can support you on one condition. I need you, after you get elected, to endorse Congressman Hall. Okay, she was sitting right there. She said very little other than this is Hatcher's running the show here. Okay, and I says, and I had no idea what to say except my father drilled in my head because he knew I was going out there. He says, whatever you do, don't make any commitments to get involved in any other race. Okay?
Yeah.
So I basically parroted what my dad told me, okay? Now, remember, I'm there for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So when I get home, okay, my dad's really agitated, okay? Because he thinks I've been with Hatcher for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okay?
Who knows what's happening? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And he refuses to. I says, Dad, I told him what you told me, word for word.
Yeah.
Okay? And he doesn't believe me. He says, how could you just say that and be there for 3 hours, 3.5 hours now, okay? So I was appalled because he didn't believe me.
Yeah.
All right? But he just didn't understand that I was waiting for 3 hours and I had 15 minutes with him, okay? Right. So I remember Hatcher, he was not happy, but he was professional, okay?
Yeah.
His talk was very, very soft-spoken, gentlemanly, professional, okay?
Yeah.
But he didn't get what he wanted, all right? So I have no commitments, right? East Chicago, why don't we talk to Hatcher? I talked to Hatcher, did not give Hatcher what he wanted, so I really got nothing.
Wow.
So now I'm going back to Bloomington. Driving out of the driveway, my sister runs out of the house, okay? Just catches me, barely catches me. It's Mayor Pastrick. Okay, put the car in forward, park the car, grab the phone. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but he says, we're going to support you. And when he says we, he's talking his organization.
Yeah.
East Chicago. Now, that's kind of a nice way to travel for 3.5 hours to go to Bloomington, right? with that in the back of your head?
Yeah.
Now, took my 2 exams, came back, all right? The day of the election was December 19th, 83. And the phone was ringing off the hook because people were trying to get their hooks into me.
Mm-hmm.
So that day, all I did was write Christmas cards. I ignored the phone. My sister answered all the phone calls, took the messages. I didn't return a single one.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were reacting to, the word from Patrick, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, Pastor calls again. And he tells me, I want you to call Richard Hatcher again. Right? And, okay, where's the number? I call Hatcher. This time, he picks up the phone, all right? No secretary, no waiting, all right? Asks me the same question. Well, I'm going to give him the same answer, okay? Again, nothing uncivil.
Right.
The guy's a perfect gentleman.
Yeah.
Right? But we've already been through this, right?
Yeah.
Hangs up the phone, right? Go to the county government center where the vote is. And Patrick runs up to me. And he doesn't run up to me. He meets me and
Yeah.
he just, did you make your phone call? And I said, yeah. I was going to tell him he wasn't interested, okay, in the details.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make the phone call? Yeah. He walked away. All right. So I don't know, what's going on. We're on the stage, 7 candidates, all right? There's some heavyweight candidates. One was a lawyer
Mm-hmm.
who was a former priest.
Okay.
He marched with Martin Luther King.
Mm.
He got shot marching with Martin Luther King.
Wow.
Okay? He was in his mid-40s, right? He thought he was the most qualified. He was, right? There were other strategic people put in, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting there minding my own business, and all of a sudden, this is before the vote, okay? One of the candidates announces he's withdrawing. As he comes behind me, he whispers in my ear, "Congratulations," and he walks out. Okay? This is before the votes.
What
Right?
is happening?
Yeah. Congratulations. Well, I don't win on the first ballot.
Okay.
I win on the second ballot.
Okay.
Okay? And I remember walking to the corner of the room where my dad was. And the first words I said to him is, I have no idea what I'm getting involved in. All right?
Yeah.
24 years old, right?
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm already enrolled to go back to Bloomington in January. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I paid the tuition, have a house, like everything. Got my, I don't know if I got my books yet, but I'm ready to go.
Right.
Now I'm not going to Bloomington, right?
Yeah.
So, Pete Kadig says, now you owe me. Owe you. Yeah. He was trying to take credit for my election, right? He says, after you get sworn in at the state capitol, I want you to perform a magic show on the House floor. I says, you're absolutely crazy. You're nuts, right? He says, I'm dead serious, right? They're going to love it. I says, you're nuts. And he keeps bending my ear, twisting my arm, right? And he convinces me that we're going to do a magic show. I says, well, wait a minute. Is this allowed? He says, okay, we'll get permission from the speaker and I'll handle that. You just, so on New Year's Day, we're at his law office practicing because he's my assistant, okay? Makeshift assistant, right? And so we're doing the magic routines in his office, all right? And then we go to a couple of bars to practice in front of a live audience, okay? Because, he wanted to feel confident, right?
Okay.
Now, I don't tell my parents because I know if I tell my dad,
Yeah.
they shut it down,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And I don't need to be pulled, all right?
Right.
So, it's a secret, just he and I. But he gets permission from the speaker, J. Roberts Daly at that time. And I don't think he was a real, he's kind of a dour. He was kind of a, straight-laced, kind of a dour, typical.
Right.
He says, really? You want to do this, Pete? Everyone will love it. He's great, okay? So, anyway, I get sworn in. That's solemn, okay? And then Pete Katie goes to the microphone and he says, You're gonna enjoy Representative Villalpando because he's, among many things, a very talented magician. Okay? And people are half paying attention, half not, right? And all of a sudden, go ahead, Jesse. The stage is yours on the House floor. Now it's turned silent, okay? Because everyone, what the heck's going on here, right? My sister, when I pulled out this bag and an umbrella, she started panicking, right? Because she would help me with this, okay? She thought I was going to call her up to be the assistant for this, okay? Yeah. My parents didn't know what was going on, right? Oh, she didn't know what was going on. She said, no,
yeah.
Okay? Well, Pete was the assistant,
right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we performed two things on the floor of the house. Turns out, we got back to the hotel. That was the lead on every television station in Minneapolis.
Oh my God.
The magic show on the house floor, okay? The next day on the newspaper, above the fold, Indianapolis Star, right? Every paper in the state, including the Indiana Daily Student in Bloomington. So 2 days later, when I go back to the law school to tell the professors that I'm not coming back, Jesse, we already know. All right? They bring out the newspaper. I'm on the front page performing magic. The headline was, IU law student magically appears in house.
Oh my gosh.
That was my introduction to
Wow.
the Indiana General Assembly.
Wow. That is pretty wild. So, yeah, there's a few things come to mind about that. I mean, it almost seems like magic. Your ability to perform magic tricks is what got you into the General Assembly in the first place, because Kadick was interested in your magic, I guess. And do we even know the specific reason about why he thought that you would be good, besides his experience interacting with you at the magic show? Or
Well, I was 24.
Yeah.
And I think he was 23 when he first was elected.
Okay.
So the age was common age.
Yeah.
Okay? My dad supported Pete.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, he always counted on my dad to deliver his precinct for Kadick. Mm-hmm. So those two factors in addition to the magic.
Wow. It's also interesting, though, is and I guess this would be probably surprising for a lot of people, is just seeing all the different political factions and how complex it is to get all these people aligned to back you in order to improve your chances of winning an election in the first place.
Well, again, politics is a game of addition.
Yeah.
Okay? But Hatcher boycotted the vote. The Gary delegation did not even go to the caucus. Okay? Which was an advantage. All right?
Okay, yeah.
Because I wasn't going to get their support.
Right. They won't support someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't support anybody else.
Yeah.
So, as much as I thought, that's strange, okay, I didn't realize that was actually a benefit.
Yeah.
So, Hatcher and I, we got along over the course of his mayorship, and then his daughter became an attorney. She's now in the legislature. She is sitting right next to where I was back in the day. And when she came into court, we never had a problem, and Mayor Hatcher and I had a very cordial political relationship, and I think he appreciated, at least I was honest with him.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, looking back at sort of your introduction into the General Assembly and getting involved in politics. Do you think that was a good process to, sort of have to align with all these people and negotiate kind of behind the scenes before you run to make sure you get enough backing? I mean, obviously you were kind of thrown in it, so you didn't like enter willfully, basically, as some other candidates might have. Do you feel like the process was overly complicated to run for the General Assembly, or do you think that was just part of the course?
It was 19 days. It was a whirlwind. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I took 4 exams in that period of time.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I was doing this 100%. I had to take my exams, pass my classes, and then traveling back and forth. But yeah, it was a whirlwind of 19 days I must have got maybe 5 hours of sleep, during each night, because I was just either campaigning or studying.
Yeah. Wow. Were you the youngest member in the General Assembly?
At the time, yeah, I was 24.
Wow, it's pretty wild. I don't think I've heard quite a story like that of someone getting involved that way. That's pretty unique. Wow, okay. Fascinating. Pivoting a little bit before we get into the specifics of your career in the General Assembly, when did you get married?
Well, about 2 weeks after I was initially sworn in, which was January 4th, 1984, or I think the week after that, I'm preparing for the primary election. Because all along I knew that this was just a 1-year term.
Yeah.
That if I'm going to win and keep the job, I've got to run in the primary and in the general. Okay? So the very first weekend I'm home, my dad's got a schedule for me to start meeting people. Okay? And one of the names on the list was a steelworker friend of his, a guy named Art Torres. And so, I think on a Saturday night, in January, my dad and I go to East Chicago, and we meet Mr. Torres, okay, who's, he has 19 brothers and sisters. Okay, most of them live in East Chicago.
Right.
So right there's a lot of votes there.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of connections.
Right there, right off the bat, right? But I met his wife, okay, and they introduced me to a young lady, their daughter, okay, and she was a very attractive young lady, caught my eye. I don't think she thought much of me, in that first experience. I think she thought I was a little, conceited, full of myself, a little maybe extra confident, okay? I remember I'm just coming off an election,
Right, yeah.
Feeling pretty good about myself,
Sure,
all right? And she more than picked that up, right? I don't know how I initially circled back, but I called her back up to help me in my campaign. Because again, every weekend I was meeting individuals, going to group events, house parties, because there was a big congressional race. Remember Katie Hall, right? Well, she was appointed too, right? She hadn't been before the voters, and so that drew a lot of attention. Our prosecutor, Jack Crawford, was the favorite in that race, even though she was the incumbent. And a nobody by the name of Peter Visklowski was also a candidate. And so this was heavy duty politics.
Yeah.
For a congressional race I wasn't an open seat, but it was an appointed incumbent, so with no strong ties, okay? Again, Crawford was probably the favorite. So my point is, there was all these political events to go to, because that was driving the show, right?
Yeah.
We were all on the same circuit, in other words. We're just going from
Yeah.
one event to the other, meeting as many people. And Liz Torres they always told me, never go out alone, okay? Have at least one person, if not more, as part of your entourage.
Yeah.
Okay? So, again, during the session, I'm down in Indianapolis, but I realize that if I am going to be remaining here, I've got to get elected on my own.
Yeah.
So I'm immediately campaigning,
Yeah.
right? And Liz is part of my entourage.
Yeah.
Certainly wasn't the only one, right? And it was, she wasn't the only, young lady helping me.
Right,
I had
right.
to go throughout, a very complex district: East Chicago, Gary, Hammond, Griffith, Calumet Township, right? Very diverse. So, I had to have, a diverse group of assistants out there with me on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
But obviously, she was a natural. Why? Just like me, she grew up in a political family. Her father had her passing out the stuff. I always say she was more involved in politics at an earlier age than me.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it turns out that, she's willingly helping me, as others are. And then, make a long story short, I'm successful in that primary. And then I, have to go back to school, okay, and finish up. Actually, I transferred to Indianapolis because I want to be closer to home when I'm going home each weekend to campaign for
Sure.
the general, okay?
Yeah.
So the people in Bloomington and Indianapolis were very, very accommodating. They just made transferred over, and then once I get elected, okay, once the pressure is kind of off, then we began dating, okay, after the business was over. But we were on and off like any young couple, and then in 1987 I proposed, and then we waited for about 13 months, which was good. It was all good, and we got married on July 2nd, 1988. So it was 4.5 years, okay, from the time I met her to the time we married in East Chicago. 4.5 years later.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Wow. So, yeah, lots of moving parts here in your life. Jeez. Do you have any children?
Yes. Elizabeth gave me the greatest gift any woman could give any man: 2 healthy children, boy and a girl, healthy, intelligent, ambitious. We're very proud of our children. My son is going to be 30 in January, and my daughter will be 28 in February.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My son lives in Milwaukee, and my daughter in Chicago.
Oh, okay. Sure. Let's see. When you first got into the General Assembly, who would you say were some of your mentors?
Good. Yeah. Well, just to show you how green I was, okay?
Yeah.
How I have to use the word unprepared, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
I was startled with how partisan the General Assembly was. Okay?
Okay.
Because again, Lake County, right? Lake County, and I got to know this, better than I in granular detail over a period of years.
Yeah.
Okay, but even then, 24. It's a Democratic county, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Republicans really are running the show. Okay? Yeah. It took me a long time to understand how that really worked.
Yeah.
Because it's not apparent.
Right.
Right? Here, it was like war zone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Up there,
Yeah.
it's all rigged. Right? It's all, right? Everyone's buddy-buddy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not down here. Not in General Assembly.
Yeah.
Secondly, okay, all right, it's different, based on partisanship. Secondly, the committee setups. Even though we had, I think, 42 members out of the 100, we didn't chair any of the committees. Okay? I didn't know that one of the fundamental rules of organization is the majority party chairs every committee, has majorities in every committee. It's all controlled, okay? Right?
Yeah.
In a very partisan way. So, that was the shock. because it was, everything up there is it's an old boys club, as I understood it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, once I realized this is a different setup here, okay? You're living in now 2 different worlds. That's how I always considered my service. The General Assembly and Lake County, separate and distinct.
Mm-hmm.
I had to straddle the 2 worlds.
Okay.
Right? Now, thankfully, I had wonderful mentors, okay? First and foremost, of course, is our leader at the time, minority leader. He eventually became speaker, Michael K. Phillips from Boonville, right? But the most influential member that I learned of the committee structure was a representative from Lebanon, John Donaldson, Republican, chairman of the Judiciary Committee.
Okay.
He was I learned so much from him. And in a way, after a few years, he treated me almost like an adopted son, okay?
Wow, yeah.
Because he knew how much I respected him. He was a big IU basketball fan, okay? All right. And I learned from him. And there were guys like John Thomas, his right hand from Brazil, okay? There was, I call him my favorite Republican, John Keeler from Indianapolis, okay? These guys were the core of the Judiciary Committee. They were smart. They were legislators, okay? It wasn't partisan. That was one of the few committees where they didn't want the judicial business to be just DNR, okay? So it was a breath of fresh air to go to the Judiciary Committee where it wasn't just partisan politics, like it was in the Education Committee, like it was in the Ways and Means Committee, okay? A Labor Committee, all right? It's straight politics, DNR politics. Donaldson always wanted things to come out bipartisan. And so that had a tremendous impact on me. And so years later, when I became chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I ran the committee exactly the same way, okay? I developed his subcommittee structures. I wanted to make sure it had buy-in from both parties. As a consequence, I don't think I ever had a bill leave my committee that ever got defeated on the floor of the House.
Wow.
Because I had built-in support from the outset by being bipartisan in committee.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned Lake County politics being so different. Can you describe some of the ins and outs of why Lake County politics is so different than the General Assembly?
Oh, gosh. Well, part of it is the composition.
Okay.
It's a very diverse, but at the very top, it's not diverse.
Okay.
Right? So how do the people at the top control a very diverse community? Okay? I've always called it 2 pyramids. There's the political pyramid, and then there's the business pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And I always saw them as completely distinct.
Okay.
Right? Except at the top. At the very top of the political pyramid and the business pyramid, there is communication. Okay? But at all the middle levels, lower levels, they might have been a foreign country. Okay?
Okay.
In other words, they don't want people getting together. Keep everyone distinct, distrusting each other.
Okay.
Only the boys at the top, get together.
Okay.
Right? And so the boys at the top, are able to, develop a common agenda, right? And then it's command and control, right? And there's no communication between, people, in the minions, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And that's strategic,
Yeah.
right? Keep everyone, in their own corners. We don't want them to overthrow the establishment.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's I've never seen any of that anywhere else.
Okay.
And that's really how, that's how, you know, there's minority politics that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how they control things. They pick the leaders of the various blocks.
Okay.
Okay? Then they expect those leaders to follow the command from on top.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? And sometimes those leaders are following the commands and not what the people really want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the problems start.
Interesting. And it sounds like this was must have been some like long established hierarchy that existed for years. That is just so ingrained in it.
It's a political machine.
Yeah.
Adopted from the Chicago.
Yeah.
That outlived Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. Wow. Let's see. When it came to your expectations for the legislative process, was it more complicated than you expected, or did you have a pretty good idea of what it was going to be like?
Had no idea what it was
Okay.
like. So I learned, fortunately, I was at an age where a law student, I was, I was able to pick things up quickly.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
Because you're just a sponge at 24. Okay?
Sure.
And I found it so interesting, and I enjoyed the people. Right. So I was really quiet in committee. Mm-hmm. I was watching what was going on. Because I started from such a low knowledge base to begin with.
Yeah.
I had so much to pick up. So once, and it's purposely confusing. Mm-hmm. I remember, having reporters who were new to the General Assembly, okay? And I was already years in the system. Mm-hmm. They were totally confused by what goes on in the State House.
Yeah.
Particularly at the end of the session, right? And I remember telling before I had a full grasp of why things operate the way they do in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
When I became a lawyer, one of the partners in the law firm was a former legislator, Richard Lesniak. Mm-hmm. So he spent 4 years down here. So he kind of knew the system.
Yeah.
And I remember says one time, Rich, I was in probably my third year, so I hadn't mastered everything. I remember telling him, we could do this in 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops, right? Mm-hmm. Because it just seemed like the name of the game was the conference committees.
Right. Yeah.
Why can't we just go to the conference committees? Okay.
Yeah.
It's like the NBA playoffs.
Right.
They play 82 games and
then have the playoffs.
Yeah. Let's just get it on the playoffs, right? And he looked at me and he said, Jesse, you don't get it. Okay. Okay. Once he said that, there is a reason why you have all this committee stuff and going back and forth for 3 months, and then it's game on the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? It just takes a while to figure out. And no one really, there's no book.
Right.
Right? I mean, you got to learn this on the fly.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, even though we were getting beat up every day, I was in the minority, right? Mm-hmm. Thankfully, that's how you learn your lessons.
Yeah.
Right? You don't really. I'm sure you learn in the majority, right? But one of my favorite friends from Lake County, his first 2 years in the Senate, they were in the majority. First 2 years. Those 2 years, most of his bills passed. For the rest of his career, they were in the minority. So he didn't realize how good he had it until after he was in the minority.
Right.
He was just the opposite. I got my head beat in, for 5 years, but I learned. So when we had the first 50-50 in 88, and then ultimately we got control after the 90 election, I operated just like the Republicans.
Yeah.
Okay? All right?
Yeah.
I didn't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
My practices were just like them. And in the judiciary, I tried to be as nonpartisan as possible, just like they were. Okay? But everything else is partisan. Mm-hmm. Hardball.
Yeah.
And so be it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, it sounds like through most of your career, it was the relationship between Democrats and Republicans, but beyond the judiciary stuff was pretty hard nosed, I guess.
Very,
Yeah.
very hard nosed. And but hey, that's my dad always said, life is cold, cruel, and mean. All right.
Yeah.
So wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but here's what was nice. We could fight on the floor. Okay. And just really, beat heads. And then at the end of the day, we can literally have a drink in the bar, watch the ball game on television, or go to Bloomington to watch the basketball game, okay? Together. So the camaraderie was terrific in my early years.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Early years.
Yes. Emphasis there.
It changed.
Yeah.
And now when I go back there, I can't recognize it. There's a stiffness that didn't exist when I was there, except for a month ago when I went to a reunion of legislators.
Yeah.
Association of
The Armiga.
Armiga,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful. But because we're all out,
Right. Yeah.
no pressure, no politics. Everyone's first name. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was socially in those early years.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. You can fight cats and dogs,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you're sitting down there having a drink or having a meal or watching a game together, and then you go back at it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. And it was a very, very valuable experience that I tried to carry on in the rest of my professional career. That no matter how much we were at odds politically, that when the whistle stops, okay, stop, right, and try to get to know people, and because you have a common constituency, right? You've got different views.
Yeah. So I guess over time then, during your service in the General Assembly, it just became politics even outside of the political arena then? Or because things became worse over time, it sounds like, as you said in the early years?
You see, here's the dynamic as I see it.
Yeah.
When I came in, the Republicans ran the show.
Yeah.
Okay? They had the governor, had the Senate, had the House.
Yeah.
Then Evan Bayh comes onto the scene, right? He gets elected Secretary of State. In that election, I think that was the 86 election, we went from 39 to 48. So we gained a lot in that one election.
Yeah.
In 88, when he ran for governor, that's when we got the 50-50.
Okay.
Right? That 50-50 was a good thing. We call it the Noah's Ark house. Because if you remember, and others have told you, in 88, which is the first time in the history of the state, there was a 50-50 General Assembly in the House.
Yep.
There was no mechanism. There's no, President Pro Tem breaks the tie like in Washington.
Yeah.
So we came to organize on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Organization usually is what, half an hour? But that year, 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats. No precedent. Okay? Tuesday turns into Wednesday. Right? Wednesday turns into Thanksgiving. We're still down here fighting about how we're going to operate the house. I remember I called my wife Wednesday night. I said, "Hey, I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving."
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know what she did? After work, she was working in Maryville. She drove to the state capitol. Right? We're still in session at like 3 in the morning on Thanksgiving.
Oh my gosh.
Right? From Tuesday. And finally, at around about midnight, the obvious solution, right? Noah's house. Noah's Ark's house.
Yeah.
We're going to have 2 speakers. Each committee will have 2 chairmen. The committees will be evenly divided. The speakers will alternate. One day it's a Democratic speaker at the podium, next day it's a Republican speaker. Alternates, okay? That was the only viable solution.
Yeah.
Why it took,
Right.
how many hours?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? The people were well served.
Yeah.
But here's the dynamic. The next election was important because redistricting in 91. We won control. And then for most of the 90s, absent the Newt Gingrich landslide in 94, we had control of the House for all but 2 of those years. That changed the larger political dynamic. Right? Because remember, when I started, Republicans ran the show, right? The Republicans, we would joke, when they were in the minority, they weren't very good at it, right? They were used to running the show,
Yeah.
right? So when they're in a minority, we were like professionals in the minority, Democrats. Until we got control, then we had to learn how to be in the majority. We had the advantage of that 50-50 House.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, I worked with Richard Bray, who was Courts and Criminal Code chairman. I was the chairman. We were both chairman.
Right.
Right? It was better to start in the 50-50 than if we had control just like that. Okay?
Yeah.
So we got practice, in other words.
Sure.
But as we asserted more control, right, over the 90s, right? And Republicans, they weren't too happy. Right? And a lot of that camaraderie crumbled. You see, it was a change from everyone knew that they were running the show to they're not used to being, out of power, and that affected the social aspect of the House.
That's interesting. So, do you think there was any impact sort of trickling down from national politics that also influenced it, or is it mostly just a state issue of the Republicans being so used to power and then realizing this isn't fun, we can never let this happen again?
Here's how use an issue.
Okay.
Education.
Yeah.
When I started, education, is politics because there's so much money involved.
Sure.
Right? But believe me, I always believed in the beginning of my service, it was nonpartisan politics. Right? Because everyone's got schools in their district. And everyone wants good public schools. So even though it was about control over of some of the nuances, the details of education policy, everyone wanted their schools funded, okay? Regardless of political party. Once we got control, we started building our alliances. The education community was one of our 3 pegs of the stool, okay? And so those ties were observed by the other side. So even though it was a good thing for us to be tight with the education community, it had ramifications. And I think the first few issues that we saw were these charter schools, these vouchers.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't exist. They were invented to drive a wedge between the Democrats and the education establishment. So once they got control, okay, because it went, we had it for most of the 90s, but there were 2 years we didn't have it. The teachers felt it, okay, because the Republicans, they wouldn't say this. This is my gut enunciating what I saw and observed, okay. I didn't see the nonpartisan politics that I saw in the beginning, okay. We got it now, and you picked the wrong side, teachers, right? And that got worse because again, after 2 years, we got back in control again.
Yeah.
Right? And so we doubled down on our alliances. That created more problems. And I'm just talking, that's just one issue,
Right.
education.
Yeah.
Right? Again, it all goes back to that dynamic, when I started in the early '80s, everyone knew the Republicans were running the show, and everyone was a good sport about it. But as a Democratic governor for 16 years, okay, and the House Democrat, right? I mean, we had to negotiate with the Senate, of course. That never changed.
Yeah.
But when you have the governor and you have one chamber, you got the edge. And so that affected how issues were negotiated, I think, in 2000s, when the power shifted back to the conventional, okay? By that time, that's when they had the charter schools soaking up a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? Vouchers soaking up a lot of money at the expense of public education.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you think like these sort of party alliances with outside political groups kind of started to fracture state politics in a way that was basically causing more intense political polarization then?
Right.
Wow, that's fascinating. I've never thought about that. Interesting. And do you see this still going on today then as well?
It's worse. I think it's worse. I think I can't as much as I can recognize the institution.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the legislature and the governorship, right? And again, it was so wonderful to come down a month ago, visit with my former colleagues, and none of that rancor existed.
Right.
And it was just pure social, and it was wonderful. Okay. Having said that, I can't recognize the state politically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's because our majorities were paper thin, right? Even when we had a 55 to 45 majority, that 55 was 500 votes statewide. We literally had 2 or 3 House races, squeakers, 10 votes, right? Again, our 5 majority was 500 votes, right? So it was thin, but that majority was powerful for 500 votes in a state where there's 2 million votes cast in a general election. 500 votes determines the House. Pretty amazing. So naturally, a lot's going to go in. A lot of energy is going to go in to try and change that 500 vote margin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Intense politics. Right? Big money.
Yeah. It's like campaign finance.
Big money.
Yeah.
All right? Enters a fray.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in my district, they left me alone. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
They couldn't. And that's why I got along with the Republicans, because they never targeted me.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
So, hey, thank you very much. But my most of my Democratic colleagues, they were in wars to get elected. I had to deal with primaries. Okay, so it's not like I had a picnic. My headaches were always in the spring.
Yeah.
Right? Up in Lake County.
Yeah.
But once you got through that, it was smooth sailing.
Sure.
But everywhere else, it was the opposite.
Yeah. I suppose that all this money being thrown into these campaigns and stuff probably contributes to the problem, because it encourages people sort of being attached to the system of being aligned with these big groups that have lots of influence, and then them throwing money into campaigns, and it kind of, I guess, feeds itself almost.
That combined with the fact that, I hate to say it, I'm almost reluctant to say it,
Yeah.
but I want to be as forthcoming as possible.
Sure.
I remember I said I can't recognize the state. It's because there's no state party anymore for the Democrats. Marion County, they're strong.
Yeah.
Lake County, and the college towns.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
When I started, and throughout my service through 2000, the Democrats controlled southern Indiana. Right? In the legislature. We might have Anita Becker from Evansville, right? And maybe a Republican down on the Indiana side of Louisville, until we beat Wathen, right?
Yeah.
But it was all Democrat.
Yeah.
Now it's totally Republican,
Yeah.
right? I saw something in the paper. There's only 2 Democrats south of Bloomington, and that's got to be Evansville and probably Cincinnati or Louisville. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, so and then in our area, it's even in the legislature. It's half and half in Lake County. That's redistricting. Okay, that's the power of drawing those maps.
Yeah.
But once they had these supermajorities, they stuck.
Yeah.
Right? It's not been going back and forth.
Right.
And that has caused me to not even recognize the state politically anymore.
Yeah, I suppose once it gets to the point where one party has just such a dominant control, it's pretty hard to get rid of that grip on the state.
And they don't operate, remember I told you at the beginning of this interview, like Lake County where, the Democrats dominate, but they got their hand around the Republicans got their hand around Lake County, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist down here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay?
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Thinking a little bit about your campaigns and stuff. Did you have a particular campaign strategy when you're running through all these elections?
Yeah. Well, number one, my dad always drilled in my head, even though I really never had a close campaign.
Yeah.
Because he always told me, run like you're 10 points behind. Okay? And you run through the tape. It's like a sprint. No matter how long it is, and campaigns can be long because it's so intense, right?
Yeah.
There's no days off. You have to focus entirely on what you're doing. And my mom would see me coming home at night, literally trudging up the steps, and she would see the weight, just,
Sure.
a great way to lose weight, go on a campaign up there.
Yeah.
So it's effort, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's no substitute. The 1 year that I was building my home for our family, I had an opponent that ran against me the previous election, but I was focused on building the house, and I saw it in the returns.
Yeah.
I won, but not by the margin I won 2 years earlier. So that was the lesson: is you can never ever let up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I always ran on issues. Okay, I had a 3-legged stool, and my first leg was always public education. My second leg was public safety.
Okay.
And my third leg was bread and butter economic issues. I'm from a strong labor district, so I was always strong labor, organized labor. So those were the 3 main planks that I emphasized in my campaign. And then I, organized, the details around those 3 planks. But I was always issue-oriented. But the main thing is you have to work hard. You cannot take anything for granted. And the 1 year, 1990, when I was focused on building the house, and I'm glad I did, because that's important. That was where our family is living, and we still live there today. I saw the polls. I didn't work the campaign as hard because I had beaten the guy 2 years earlier, and it was like the vote was a little over 2,000 votes when I won, and a lot of people says, "What happened?" And I says, "Well, you're not going to see that again."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it had a lasting impression. So you never take the voters for granted. Never.
Yeah, sure. How would you keep in touch with your constituents and keep up to date with all the things that they wanted you to work on?
Well, I remember in the early days,
Yeah.
we used to meet 5 days a week down here. Okay, so at the end of the session, we'd have session early on Friday morning, and then everyone would leave to go back to the districts. I go back to the hotel and get a couple hours sleep. I come back to the State House, and people are leaving. It's Friday afternoon, right? That's when I would write my newsletters. Back then, I wrote them from scratch.
Yeah,
okay?
Sure.
And I tailored them based on what was happening at that very moment.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I would be at the State House, for 3 hours. And then I would drive home. I get home on Friday nights late. I was single, okay? I was living home with my parents. So I was very, very involved in the development of my political messaging. As I developed, the staff would present basically canned, issues. Pick 3 screens of the 7 to be put in your newsletter. That's not how I started. I did it myself because I was coming right out of law school. I was used to that academic rigor, okay? And so I applied that same rigor to my legislating, okay? And I wanted to communicate that to my people. And the best way to do that was through the newsletter. Because that was going out, that's not just speaking to, 100 people.
Yeah.
That's tens of thousands of people in that newsletter.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, yeah, beyond the newsletter, of course, I'm out at the events. I would joke, my car, I would put 25,000 miles on my car each year.
Wow.
Right? Because I was on the streets every night.
Yeah.
And then I became a lawyer, of course, and then like when you're in Lake County, there's no one central courthouse. So you got to travel to the courthouses. So that was a lot of my miles too, driving to and from court. But, if you're going to be in office, you cannot ever take the voters for granted. You have to maintain that contact.
Yeah. Thinking about some of your work in the General Assembly, do you remember the first bill that you sponsored?
Yeah, the first bill that I sponsored, it passed the House, it didn't go anywhere in the Senate.
Okay.
There was a tie in the in one of the districts. Okay.
Okay.
And so I had a bill to how to break a tie, and it's been so long ago I can't even remember how it was resolved. But that was my first bill that passed the House. And then it just languished in the Senate. Didn't become law. So that's my first one. But that was when we were in the minority.
Sure. Okay. What differences were there between the House and Senate from your experiences?
The big bad Senate, huh?
I've heard that one a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like going to a foreign country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right across the rotunda. It's just you can throw a baseball over there.
Right.
You might as well be, in China. Politically, okay?
Yeah.
Because what got me in those early years was, I'm 24 years old. Okay, I'm 70 pounds lighter. Okay. Whereas most of the senators were older, right? So they're moving, like I move now. Okay. A little slower, but they think the camera's on them all the time. They're moving like this and grand gestures, right? And the come on, right?
Yeah.
Believe me, they ran it like an iron fist. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're in the Senate, right? You got to play by their rules. Now, of course, it took time. That the only thing they really respect is not intellect, okay? They don't respect intellect. They don't respect an argument. You know what they respect? When I would read one of their bills, right? It's a good bill. Garbage can. That's what they respected.
Interesting. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Once they knew that you were perfectly willing, to put their program in the garbage can, that's when suddenly the light goes off. Right? And once that's done, you know what? I dealt with them.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Swords, for example, started in the House. I met him the first night with Pete Katic in the press club, right? He goes over to the Senate. He becomes chairman of the Judiciary Committee. We knocked heads, but once he understood that I was willing to, play hardball, we became excellent partners.
Okay.
Same is true with his successor, Richard Bray, who was my co-chairman on the Courts of Criminal Code, he went to the Senate.
Yeah.
We were like brothers, okay? Once he understood, and he understood because we served together under every possible political configuration. Republican majority,
Yep.
50-50, Democratic majority, right? So when he gets in the Senate, he already knew how I was going to be, all right? We didn't play games. He is still to this day one of my best friends. And I couldn't be happier that his son is now running the Senate. Because if he's anything like his dad, he's got to be, a decent person. He's Richard Bray from Martinsville. Totally different district, okay? Couldn't be more different than mine. But I consider him, you talk about a mentor, more than a mentor, a great friend.
Yeah. That's cool.
And but it's business.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I just relied on friendship, forget about it.
Right.
They got to know that you're willing to take the heat.
Yeah.
Because they had some good ideas too, right?
Right.
And you got to throw their good ideas in the a can.
Yeah.
And then boom, you got their attention.
Yeah.
And then we negotiated.
Okay, so the kind of a power dynamic there. You have to show that you are capable of wielding power as well.
You have to.
Yeah.
You can't be Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah. Sure. Interesting. Did you have a pretty good sense of how people would vote prior to actually voting on the legislation?
Sure. Yeah. Remember, again, so much of it is partisan, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
You
first
count
guy.
pretty quickly that
That's
way,
your
yeah.
first guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there were always people who each caucus had troublemakers.
Okay.
From leadership
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
And so we would try and snag them, and they would try and snag our discontents. But a handful, okay? I mean, sometimes just one in each caucus.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple. So yeah, that's why I said earlier, this is so monotonous. This first period of the session, but there's a reason for it. People got to vote, because so much of the activity is driven by the special interests. Okay, and they're out there politicking with their members, right? So they need to show production in the General Assembly for the benefit of their members. And that's what the first 3 months of the session is largely about, okay? And then everyone's got positions, kind of staked out, but, then those last 2 weeks are the weeks that are the session days that, it's fish or cut bait, to get to something if you're going to get anything at all.
Yeah. Sure. That makes sense. How influential then would you say party leadership was?
Extremely influential. Because the old expression was at the end of the session, this is the only game in town. That was one of the common expressions. And that only game in town, unless you were involved in that conference committee, okay, really just had the fingerprints of those 4 members and the leadership.
Yeah.
So many times, the only game in town, which bore no resemblance to what you were debating here, okay, in the 3 months, is because the leadership wields tremendous influence on those conferees.
Yeah.
Because they can appoint and they can remove. And so when they appoint, they usually tell you where they want this to go, right? And if you don't produce, you can be removed.
Yeah.
Tremendous influence the leaders have.
Did you ever go against party leadership?
I rarely did.
Okay.
Rarely, if ever. I mean,
Yeah.
because number one, I knew how influential they were.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember there was one time when I kind of exploded. I was not happy because but I was young. I was probably still in my early 30s, and my leader was with me until the end. And then we went into special session. Okay? And the special session is even more compact than the conference committee. Okay? And I learned early on in the special session that all bets were off. All the support I got through the session wasn't going to carry over into the special session. So I got angry. Okay? I told my dad about it. He understood why. And a couple of my dad's senior friends said, You know, they were with me on the issue, right? But then my dad said, when you go back downstate, I want you to go, first opportunity, go see Mike Phillips and tell him, despite what happened, you're the speaker, and I'm going to do whatever you want. Whatever you want. I'm with you. So I remember going from my position in the caucus room after the caucus broke up, and I'm walking toward the speaker, and I can see him getting a little anxious because, you know, I was a little loud on the phone.
Yeah.
Right? So he lightened, he was tightened up. I could see him tense. And I says, Mike, I'm with you. I want you to know. Okay? And it's pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
He relaxed, shook my hand, and I don't think I ever again was out of I understood what happened. You learn some tough lessons down here. Okay. But that was about it. I stayed with my leadership, and it proved wise. Okay, because I did have, I think by most estimates, a lot of power when we were in the majority, and I operated like the Republicans, so they couldn't say that I'm some crazy guy from Lake County, throwing hand grenades. All right,
Yeah.
I operated just like they did, and I was tight with my leadership. And I had some influential political backers back home too, so I weaved it all together, and I left. I think I had a major influence on the judicial issues and the public safety issues, and I voted for taxes if they benefited education. Okay, and I had great relations with the trial lawyers. Okay, and I had wonderful relations with all the senior citizens groups. Okay, and the labor groups, because we went to war on some tough issues in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so those ties were strong.
Did you ever feel pressure to vote a certain way on legislation that you didn't really think that highly of, or?
Oh, of course. We used to make a joke of it, hold your nose, push the button. Okay? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't fight every battle, like it's your last. You got to pick and choose your battles.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
You can't if you'll and don't wear out the carpet to the microphone. Okay. I was very selective in going to the microphone. There were members who were they wanted to weigh in on 80% of the issues.
Yeah.
People don't listen to you.
Yeah.
All right. You get the attention if you go up there infrequently.
Yeah.
And that's, I think,
That's right.
I follow that model.
Okay. How would you say your legislative service affected your family life?
Oh, yeah. It's a great job for a single person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that.
At the end of my service, I told you, at the end of my service, I was the first person out of the state capitol. Okay? In contrast to those early years when I was single, I wouldn't get home until 8, 9 o'clock on Friday night. Speaker Manweiler, Republican Speaker, changed to what we called family-friendly schedule, 4-day schedule. Okay? Thursdays, we would meet kind of late in the morning on the floor. So we were done sometimes, depending upon what stage of the session, like early in the afternoon on Thursday. My car was packed in the parking lot. I was the first one out of the State House, into the car, on the street, within 10 minutes of the gavel hitting, right? Complete contrast to how I was in the beginning. Why? I had a family, and I had a job.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the family first. My family, my wife carried the ball. So many of my colleagues remember my children only because they remember them in the stroller. When my wife would come down, first my son and then my daughter, Yeah, it's an extraordinary sacrifice for the non-legislative spouse who's got to carry the ball home. My wife would joke that if we were married for 10 years, by the calendar, we've only really been married 6 years. He spent the last 4 years in the General Assembly. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's tough. Okay? And after 17 sessions, I was tired of being away from home.
Yeah.
I really, and again, it was a combination of the job that I had to support the family through my law practice, and being down here, it had a tremendous impact on my ability to, make a living. A lot of my clients liked the fact that I was down here because they liked my lawyer, the state rep. Okay, They also liked the continuances we got automatically because we were down here, right? But the continuances benefited them. They didn't benefit me because I wasn't being paid.
Right.
So it was a stressful thing. But you asked about the family. My wife and any non-legislative spouse, sometimes that's the male, okay? But my wife was raising the kids by herself, at least 4 days a week, at least. And then, I'm always on the go when I'm campaigning or going to public events, and it's a sacrifice.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thinking about some more sort of legislative issues, what would you say was the most controversial legislative issue during your time at the General Assembly?
Okay. There's two parts to that.
Sure.
There's the what my bread and butter, okay, or the overall General Assembly. So let's talk about the overall General Assembly. I think the intensity was in the mid-'90s, those 2 years where the Republicans took control back from us. What they did that raised the most attention was in the mid like this was in '94 election, '95 session, right? They tried to redraw the maps in '95. Okay? That caused us to walk out. We went back to our districts. So, Mike Phillips would sometimes say that no matter how heated we got in caucus, we have a knockout, drag-out fight, and if it got nasty, he would say, time out. He'd get the two people, he'd walk to the window, and he'd point to the people on the street, and he would say, those two people don't even think we're in session, right? So cool it, right? They don't even know we're in session. This is not life and death.
Yeah.
We'd laugh, okay? The temperature would come down, right? But when we walked out of the House and shut the General Assembly down, people noticed, right? All the front pages, the House Democrats walk out. Republicans miscalculated. They had, I think, a better relationship with the larger media, Indianapolis Star, for example, right? It backfired on them. Instead of us being criticized for abandoning our responsibilities, right?
Right.
And all that stuff. Because they were trying to change the districts in mid-cycle. I think it was Governor Bowen. And if it wasn't Governor Bowen, it was Governor Orb. One of the governors, former governors, came out, editorialized against what they were doing. Man, well, I was shocked. Okay? And most of the editorialists sided with us. We were stunned, okay? We were prepared to get beat up.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? But what happened is, they lost that public battle. And that was an issue that people knew about. All right? Because the issue was they're not getting the business done. And why? Well, it's because they were forcing something that had never been done before, redistricting 4 years after we had already done the maps. And these maps have 4 more years of life. So they finally came back, had a face-saving mechanism to bring everyone together. The other issue that happened during that session were the labor issues. We had not just one, but two rallies. The first one filled up the state capitol with like 7,000 people, and the next one filled up the outside. 15,000 labor people from all over the state converged on the prevailing wage. It was massive. It was joyous from our perspective, okay? We lost those battles that year, okay? But we got back in power because what they were doing was so unpopular in the hinterlands, okay?
Yeah.
That got us back in power after the '96 elections. We were just out for 2 years. So those labor issues are the ones biggest bread and butter, okay? And that's what generated thousands, a cast of thousands. So it wasn't just a bunch of people, in a handful of people in a conference room, no. This was public participation at its finest, right? So those clearly. Now with me, I had some major issues that got a lot of attention, but that's not your question. That's not your last question.
Yeah, right. So what piece of legislation did you have to work the most on?
Well, okay. That's an easy question when you say most, meaning longest time.
Right.
The longest issue that I worked on was the wrongful death issue, adult wrongful death.
Okay. Yeah.
It took me 9 sessions to get that passed.
Yeah.
And it's because I was head knocking with the insurance industry. And even though I had a lot of support with the trial lawyers and the senior citizens groups and the all kinds of interest groups were weighing in on it, it was political power. The insurance industry had a friend in the Senate, and they would just block it. Finally, I was in Las Vegas with for a national conference of state legislators in 1997. Yeah, and one of the Republican senators pulled me aside, and he says, "Jesse, if you guys keep the majority in November, I'm going to give your bill a hearing." Okay? So he conditioned it, right? So we won the '98 election, okay, in the House. And so he was the first person that came to visit in '99. And he kept his word. Gave the bill a hearing. And I won't ever forget Senator Garton going to the chamber.
Yeah.
Because he was the muscle behind the anti.
Yeah.
And he gave a very eloquent speech. It really meant a lot to me. And so I was at the Senate when it happened, and the reporters were coming up to me and afterwards, and I was just struck. It wasn't high-fiving. It was just I was really, really emotional. But having said that, the most heated battles involve judges
Okay.
that are not supposed to be political, okay? By far the most heated battles in my career involve the makeup of the judiciary in our county. And it's just a symbol of the larger issue with Lake County. Laws that apply everywhere else in the state, it's different in the state of Lake. And one of the biggest and most important differences is the makeup of the judiciary. In every county but 4 now, used to be 2, but every county but 4, but back in my time it was 2 counties, Lake County and St. Joe County. Only in those 2 counties we have this wonderful merit selection system for judges. Voters don't get to pick the judges. A panel thins out the applicants, sends 3 to the governor, and the governor picks.
Hmm.
And as a lawyer, we're all supposed to fall in line, okay? Because it's the lawyers who do the selecting,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And of course, you got to practice law,
Right.
right? Now, as my influence increased here, they'd whisper in my ear, and they would tell me who's going to be the next judge up there. And they were always right before things even opened up,
Oh man. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
All cut and dried. I'm thinking to myself, why isn't that system everywhere else if it's so good, right? Because every other senator and representative, every other county, they make sure that their judges have to run just like the state reps and senators and councilmen, right?
Yeah.
They don't want them getting too little highfalutin, right?
Right.
So why can't we have that? Oh. 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 All out war over something that's not supposed to be political?
Yeah.
It's the most political issue by far. Talking power. Right?
Wow.
You don't want the people selecting the judges. Controlled.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And so, after I got a little tired of receiving the courtesies of being who's going to be the next judge, I'm thinking, this is nonsense here, right? It's all rigged. I mean, they're trying to stay on my good side by giving me the inside scoop, right?
Yeah.
But it's not having the intended effect,
Right.
right? So, our judges for a long time were underpaid. They were. And the way they made up for it, wouldn't pass ethic tests. Traveling the circuit for extra pay. Come on. It's not the way to do that. So I said, the judges need a pay raise. Of course, they agreed. And I'm chairman of the committee. Big pay raise bill. Oh, there's a condition. Lake and St. Joe, we're going to insist on the same rights that exist everywhere else. Elect our judges. Down here, everyone's nervous. Back home, more than just nervousness. Okay? For 2 sessions, not just 1, 2. The bill foundered. But nothing like the last day of the 94 session. They were editorializing on the front page of the newspaper back home. On the front page, editorializing. The editor came down to the house, violated all protocol. He hand-delivered on the House floor during the session. He has no business on the floor. He put it on every member's desk during a session.
Wow.
They don't follow rules up there. It was knockout, drag out on the House floor. But we had the votes. Because that pay bill involved more than just judges. Appellate court judges, Supreme Court judges, prosecutors, state police,
Yeah.
conservation officers, excise officers. $20 million of pay raises in one bill. And this was a off-year budget. So this was it. This was the political bill of the whole session because it had the money. Because the budget was the previous year, 93. This was it. And it had my name on it. And I was up front from beginning in 93 to the end of 94. This is what it's going to take to get this bill passed. And at 11 p.m. on the last night of the session, Senator Bray, who was my contemporary, he had to call this bill for a vote.
Yeah.
His judges needed the pay raise in Morgan County. All right? The votes were in the Senate to pass, with the Lake County provision to have elections.
Okay.
With the pay bill in one bill.
Yeah. Okay. Combined it. Yeah.
We combined it for 2 years. And there was a war for 2 years to get it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Bray had to call the bill. Something happened in the Senate. That's all I'll say. Bray takes his name off the bill. Garton puts his name on the bill. When it's Garton's time to call the bill, it's 11 o'clock, he doesn't call the bill. It doesn't get voted on. Even though we had the votes.
Wow.
The bill dies for the second year in a row. Every judge in the state lost $40,000 in pay over 2 years.
Oof.
40 grand. And that's just the judges.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now, when you were talking about wrongful death, what exactly did the wrongful death legislation intend to do?
Right. Well, what I remember, there was a guy named Harry Wilson from LaPorte County, and his son just finished college, got his college degree. So he was an adult. He was above age of majority, but he was single, and he died at a construction site, freak accident. Okay, freak. He got electrocuted. Okay, and there was negligence. And his father was told that there was nothing that he could do to even investigate what led to his son's death, because his son was a minor. Well, was not a minor, but he was single. He had no dependents. Okay, he had no dependents that were dependent upon his income, right? And because of that, the only liability was funeral expenses. Put him in the ground. That's it. You can't use the court process to determine through discovery what happened.
Yikes.
I couldn't believe it. I found out that us in Mississippi were the only states in the country. So that became my issue.
Yeah.
And that issue got tangled up in 1997. This is my 7th year at it, right? If you remember, back in 1997, there was a tragedy at an amusement park up the road, 65.
Yeah.
Little Emily Hunt
Yeah.
and her grandmother were in a roller coaster, and the roller coaster went off the track, killing the grandmother and paralyzing little Emily. So, because of the impact of the tragedy, it was big news here in Indianapolis, particularly.
Yeah.
Not so much in Lake County yet, but that would change. So the hunts were guided by professionals down here, not just lawyers, but professional PR people. So this was in the It's right before the 96 election. Okay?
Yeah.
When O'Bannon's running. So they get a commitment from candidate O'Bannon to waive laws that would have otherwise not provided income or medical expenses. Because again, these were single people, the young child and the grandmother.
Yeah.
Right? So, candidate O'Bannon, gives a commitment, right? That he's going to do something about it.
Yeah.
So, O'Bannon wins. Sessions in 97, we're in control. So they put this, let's do something for Emily in a bill, and they send it to my committee. Okay? I'm looking at this bill, and I says, wow. Because I wasn't aware of what was happening, okay? Mm-hmm. And this Emily is the same age as my daughter. Okay? Same age. Little girl. So of course, I can relate to.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing grandma is dead. All right? But grandma's not getting the attention. Grandma's dead. Wait a minute. This is the perfect vehicle to do right by both people in grandma's memory. Okay? But Indianapolis Star wasn't thinking about grandma. Indianapolis Star and the TV stations focused on Emily.
Yeah.
Right? So I had breakfast. I called up Mr. Hunt. I said, meet me at my hotel for breakfast. He was there. I says, here's what I have in mind. We're going to, whatever the governor wants to do for your family, our family, I'm with you, okay? Let's think about your former mother-in-law here, grandma. I've been working this issue of wrongful death for 7 years. Let's kill two birds with one stone here. Mm-hmm. He was a very intelligent guy. He immediately sensed trouble. Okay? Because he knew the insurance industry was going to oppose this. Right? So he wasn't happy with it. He didn't agree. I said, okay. I called you here at my expense, I wanted to, meet privately, all right? I didn't want to do this when you're seeing it on, in the audience.
Sure.
Okay? Courtesy. Mm-hmm. He thanked me for that, but he wasn't happy. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we're going to do this, right? And explosion, right?
Yeah.
Because I was upset in the apple cart. Made this thing hard was that because it was not just in the Star, it was in a newspaper. It was not just the Star; it was on television.
Yeah.
I have a sister. I have two sisters that live here in town, but then I had one sister, and because there was so much vested interests in this story, this narrative, right? It was publicized, and I was the bad guy, right? And it impacted my sister because of the last name.
Yeah. Okay.
Our names aren't too common, right?
Right.
So she took some heat. It had nothing to do with my political operation, right?
Sure.
That was not easy to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like that spiraled pretty out of control.
Out of control because there was so much attention.
Yeah.
Because of the narrative. And these guys had professional PR people driving the story. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just, a bill, right?
Yeah.
He had an entourage of people who knew how to work the system.
Yeah.
Hey, and in the end, he ended up getting, because he had the governor, okay? The governor made a commitment. And it was pretty rough.
Wow. Yeah. So would you say that the Emily bill and the bill with judges were kind of like the biggest challenges you had to face then during your time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else a piece of cake.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be hard to top those. Yeah. Yeah, I actually saw in the newspaper a few other bills that I thought were kind of interesting that I guess you were involved with a little bit. Do you remember a bill about drinking and driving that you authored?
Yeah, that was the 08 legislation.
Yeah, could have been. It was something about like you couldn't have like an open container or something. in your car.
Yeah, and but the issue was that's what ultimately became the 08 legislation.
Ah, okay, sure, yeah. So tell me a little bit about that and what was going on.
Well, that was I think it was Senator Weiss. Senator Weiss it's sort of like being on wrongful death. Okay, he had been promoting this 08 for a number of years, and of course, it drew a lot of attention, both pro and con. His major groups were the Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah.
Okay, but this also impacted businesses, restaurants, clubs, and particularly fraternal groups, because a lot of the VFWs, American Legions, they have clubs where alcohol is served,
Right.
and under 99.9% of the time served responsibly.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're dealing with people who want to have split a bottle of wine with their wives, and now are they going to be committing a crime when they go into their car and drive home a half mile, right? So it was a volatile issue, and so what ended up happening, again, I can't remember, it was in 94, I think it was the same session as as the judges.
Okay.
So, I had my hands full that year. And what happened is we came up with a compromise, right? That addressed the issue of Weiss, okay, without the business groups and the VFWs of the world, they could live with. And I was in contrast to the other bill where I was a lightning rod, I tried being the dove and getting both sides together. So that was one of my happy wars.
Yeah.
That succeeded.
Sure.
And I was the mediator, in contrast to being a lightning rod on the other issues.
Yeah.
So that was happy times.
So what did the legislation specifically do then? What was the law that passed?
Oh, I think what happened is the open container. This is a long time ago.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the narratives. I remember the narratives that was anti-open container was that going to an IU game.
Yeah.
Okay, you're in a van. You can't open up a can of beer in the back under the open container.
Yeah.
Because no one could have an open container.
Right.
So one of the compromises was as long as the driver and no one in the front seat had the open container. Okay, someone in the third row, wasn't committing a crime if they had an open beer in the van.
That's interesting. Okay.
So that was the compromise.
Yeah.
And everyone could live with that.
Wow. Okay.
And then eventually the 08 legislation followed up. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But that's my point. Is I was happy to lend myself to because I wasn't seen as a major player in that debate. So Mike Phillips says, you're going to be the ball carrier here, okay? You bring both sides together, and that's what happened.
Okay.
So that's a happy story.
So the '08 then was just about how much alcohol you could drink?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the '08 was prior to that, when I first started practicing, OWI was 0.15. So when they knocked it down to 0.08, that's the law now.
Yeah.
That's half of the legal requirement that it was 30 years ago. So that was significant, and there was a battle to get that down to '08. But there was I can't remember all the little issues that led up to that, but I just remember that I was proud to bring both sides to the table and hammer out an agreement.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know at all that someone could have an open container in their car, but I guess it kind of depends on the state too. But
yeah,
that's interesting. Wow. Okay. I saw that there was. I couldn't tell exactly what was going on, but there looked like there was debate about abortion that was going on off and on during your service. What was the debate about exactly, and what was your role?
Well, yeah, those were the most unpleasant debates.
Okay.
Because I'm Roman Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents never told me how to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But I know they expected me to be pro-life.
Yeah.
They didn't have to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I was pro-life in General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't radicalized. Okay?
Right.
And I hated those debates. Because to me, I saw it was always to gain political advantage. Okay?
Yep.
I hated seeing that issue, so emotional, right? To be used as a tool, to gain political power.
Yeah.
And so I when I had to vote, I voted pro-life. But then you see, Republicans, or not the Republicans,
Mm-hmm.
their supporters tried using me as a wedge in the Democratic caucus. Because I was one of the few Democrats who were pro-life.
Yeah.
So they tried to get me on to take a leadership role, right?
Okay.
To try and, say that now they're bipartisan.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they're trying to use me. And so, the pro-life forces naturally, yeah, Jesse, do that.
Yeah.
Right? But, I also had a lot of support among women's groups. And I wanted to keep that support.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So here's one of the things that I'm very grateful for. Because they knew I was, they meaning the leaders, the women's leaders.
Yeah.
Okay? On issues other than abortion, okay? But even like Trish Arredondo, who was the Lake County head of the opposite, the Planned Parenthood, okay?
Mm-hmm.
She knew how I was struggling with this thing. She knew I didn't want no part of this political parade, right? Or political device.
Yeah.
So there was some understanding there. And because I went out of my way on everything else that they could be for, I tried being their champion. And it worked for the most part, okay? Whereas they gave me a pass on those handful of abortion bills that I voted for, okay? Because I resisted taking a larger role, okay? And I was for them on everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I minimized the rancor but I just did not enjoy. I did not enjoy those debates.
Yeah, I'm sure that was not very fun. Was the abortion debate at that time pretty much the same as it is today, or was it different?
No, it's I remember the first bill. I remember this one I have pretty good memory on. The first session, it was the parental consent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, And to me, it just seemed logical, okay? I remember, I'm not real political in that first session.
Yeah.
I'm saying, come on. I'm thinking of my sisters, right? I would expect my sisters to be able to go to mom and dad, right? And get some guidance here.
Yeah.
That's what I expected as a natural thing, not as a political thing, right? So I voted for it. Wow. I didn't realize how sensitive, that issue was, because, as I was told by people that, young women can't go to their parents for all kind of reasons. So even though I thought they should, because in our family, you can always go home, okay? Just don't come home in a police car, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right? But you can always come home. And so that's how we were raised. But I recognize that that's not how everyone was raised. You can't go home. I understand that. But I didn't understand it when I was 24.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Do you remember a bill that was trying to ban guns from bars and restaurants?
Well, I thought you were going to say the motorcycle helmet ban. I remember that one.
Okay.
I honestly don't remember the
Okay.
guns but I there was a gun issue that I got involved in because they sent it to my committee. It was Gary had passed an ordinance, just for Gary only, banning weapons.
Yeah.
And then there was a bill filed to prevent cities from engaging in that area, and they put it in my committee, which thanks a lot, because I remember walking into that committee room and every TV station was there.
Yeah.
The room was just jammed. It was heavily attended committee hearing I've ever been to. You couldn't move, right? Thanks a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the other one.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So in terms of the motorcycle helmet one, how involved were you in that?
Oh, just as a member. Here's what's kind of funny though. I remember John Gregg was speaker at that time. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was Dennis Avery was the author of the helmet bill.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's what I remember. There were hundreds of motorcyclists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On their garb, right? And I remember John Gregg, seeing me, and he shouted, "Hello, Representative Avery," He said it loud enough where everyone, people, 100 people heard.
Yeah.
And they immediately converged on me thinking I'm Avery. Okay? I said, "Hey, wait a minute. I ain't Avery."
Yeah.
He's just yanking my chain.
Yeah.
Right? He was laughing his ass off, And I won't ever forget, those guys thinking that I'm Avery, they're gonna I said, "I ain't Avery. Okay? Let me get out of here." Oh,
God.
because that was a wild time when that bill was being
Yeah.
made, because it wasn't 7,000, but I would say easily a couple thousand, and they made a lot of noise.
Yeah. I actually interviewed Dennis Avery, and he talked about that.
Okay.
He said that was not a fun experience.
Oh. Yeah, I was Dennis Avery for 10 seconds.
You could get a taste of that. Yeah. Do you remember any legislation about giving people basically a life sentence instead of the death penalty?
Yeah, that was my bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life without parole.
Yeah.
And the reason was I as a lawyer, I would see how much resources were spent at public expense on the appellate issues, on death penalty cases.
Yeah.
It was just hundreds of thousands of dollars each case.
Yeah.
And the death penalty would take 20 years.
Yeah.
to carry out. And all that time, the lawyers on each side are spending public dollars because the defendants don't have the money to pay for their defense. All public money. And I said, this is a waste of taxpayer money. And that's how I approached it. And that's what carried the day. That was again, a very business-like, rational argument that prevailed on what was an emotional argument. When you boil it down to dollars and cents, to me it's a no-brainer. Even though a person's going to spend a lot of time in prison on public expense compared to the dollars to pay the lawyers, there's no comparison.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Looking at the big picture now, when did you leave the General Assembly?
2000.
Okay. And what was the main reason?
Well, a couple of reasons. I part of his family.
Yeah.
Okay. I was tired of being away from my family 4 days a week. And then I had a wonderful opportunity. All the bad feelings from what had transpired in 1994 had been washed away. Okay? I give the greatest tribute to then Chief Justice Shepard. A week after we got control of the House, after the '96 election, he calls me at my home, and he asks for support for this Clio bill that he would like to see advanced. And he didn't know, or maybe he did know, but I told him, I'm a Clio member myself at the federal level. One of the things Gingrich killed when he took power in Washington, they killed the Clio program federally, okay? So Shepard wanted to put Indiana Clio program. He wanted to know if I'd carry the bill. Absolutely, Mr. Chief Justice. But then I took it a step further. I says, Chief, I'm going to give you my word that what I did for 2 sessions in 93, 94 on the Lake County judges, that still had been dangling, okay?
Yeah.
It's not going to interfere with this Clio bill or anything else. That's over with. He was silent. Okay? I guess in his mind, well, time will tell, because he knew how advocate I was, all right? Well, that session, which was the same session as the Emily thing, so it was a relief to get off that Emily thing, okay, and be a workhorse, because that Clio bill morphed into it became another budget bill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Clio, public defenders, and civil legal aid. Millions of dollars went into that bill. Okay? So it was the same thing as the pay bill, right? And people came up to me, Jesse, why don't you put your Lake County thing in there, right? This is no. And so that bill went through clean to the process. And a lot of happy people. And so that all the rancor from years earlier vanished. And so my last few years, I'm on chairman of the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
I was viewed as a huge ally of the judiciary, because I kept my personal belief of the elected judges. I'm still bothered by it, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be the cause or be blamed for killing everything because of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, in 1999, I'm the author of the Omnibus Bill, Omnibus Judges Bill, which is a bill that statewide deals with judges. And based on Shepard's, he had this scale based on cases and counties. There were some counties that needed judges. There were some counties that had excess judges. And at the time, we were in a need. We in Lake County, our caseload had exploded because Years earlier, another battle I got involved in, the change of venue. We don't have time to get into those details, but that caused our caseloads to increase in Lake County.
Okay.
Because under the old law, automatic change of venue, they would get cases out of Lake County and put them into the rural areas.
Okay.
Largely for racial reasons. Okay.
Okay.
Bottom line, I fought that battle in the legislature. Shepard solved it by changing the court rule, eliminating automatic change of venue. God bless you, Shepard. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now we got all these cases in Lake County, not enough courts. So we created 6 courts, 3 courts and 3 magistrates. Out of the 20, 6 were from Lake County. Because who's the author of the bill? Me. I got to take care of my district first, right?
Yeah.
I took care of a lot of other people too.
Right.
So I remember, without saying a word, of course, John Gregg approached me. Jesse, I need a judge, in Sullivan County. No problem, Mr. Speaker. Got that bill in there, got that part of the bill. Because I was so accommodating, he figured out what was going on in my head, right? I will never forget, he's at the podium. That's how John is.
Yeah.
He puts a legal pad in front of his hand, and then he does this to me, okay? He knows what I'm thinking, right? I promise you, I never said a word. But he's no dummy.
Yeah.
Right? So the bill passes, and then all of a sudden the word goes out that, Jesse's going to retire from the legislature, and he's going to become a judge. Okay? And that's exactly what happened.
Interesting, okay. And what exactly was the Clio bill? Like, what did that do?
Council on Legal Educational Opportunity. When I was the summer before you go to law school, the federal program was they divided up the country into sections. I was the Midwest, and I went to Ohio State for 6 weeks. Mini law school, primarily blacks, Hispanic, women. I say non-traditional. Okay, there were some white males, but not too many. Okay, it was extremely diverse. Right. I mean, it was like, in our class, I think it was 40, right? But it was very diverse. Gingrich killed that, right? So Shepard established an Indiana Clio, same thing. They rotated it between the law schools. And in addition to the training, scholarship. In my day, back in the 70s, early 80s, early 80s, 81 is when I went, it was $1,000 a year, okay? Doesn't sound like much, but back then, law school was only $5,000 at IU, right? So that was 1/20th, was 20% stipend. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
When Shepard, I forget it was much more, Indiana program, because the costs had kept going up. But so it was a combination of you're reaching out, trying to recruit minority law students, give them some training so that when they go to law school, it's not like a shock. It's a shock anyway, but that 6 weeks did help me prepare and provided some financial assistance. So it was a winner all the way around. It was one of Shepard's great programs, and I was honored to work with him on it.
Yeah, okay. So looking back, how would you summarize your time as a legislator?
It was the most dynamic period of my life.
Yeah.
Because, the old expression, you're a jack of all trades, master of none. But we painted with a broad brush, and we affected everything in Indiana.
Yeah.
With a broad brush. When I was a judge, it was just the opposite. It's with a laser. You're only impacting the people in front of you, but you're impacting them directly and immediately.
Sure.
Okay? The exact opposite. 2 different jobs. But the legislature, we touched everyone's life, and it was so. There's no more dynamic process than the legislative process.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've talked about a lot of different fascinating stories, but do you have a favorite story from your service?
My dad was dying. His heart was giving out. The last conversation I had with him about business, government, was in January of '99. And I said, hey, I think this is the year the wrongful death bill is going to pass. They're finally going to give me a hearing in the Senate. And I remember his voice was very weak, but it was clear. And I just remember him saying, it's good. So when the bill passed, I remember I'm listening in the garden.
Yeah.
Thinking of my dad and my sister. Because my mother always believed the hospital messed up with my sister.
Okay. Yeah.
And my mom was very adamant about control. But in a moment of anger, she said, the hospital owes us what they did to Kathy. I know that's a mother talking after losing her daughter. But I knew there was a lot of pent-up anger. And so my dad died 2 weeks later, so he never saw the bill pass. So when the bill passed, and I got the call from Governor O'Bannon's staff that they were going to have the signing in the office. And of course, he wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And so just before I left, I called my mom. And I says, I've never involved my mom in my politics, ever. She was my number one voter.
Yeah.
But she was never on the stumps with me, okay? And she wasn't a Mrs. Kennedy, okay?
Sure.
But I told her what was going to happen. I said, would you like to come down with me? She said, of course. And so she came into the governor's office for the first time and only time of her life. They sat her down. The room was filled with people because there were shifts of groups getting in there for their picture of the governor on variety bills. But we had a pretty large contingent with our group, and it was the trial lawyers, it was the senior citizens groups, it was Harry Wilson, his father. And I'll never forget, of course, the governor sat in the middle, and he says, Jesse, I want you to sit here. And then Senator Lux sat on the other side, he was my sponsor in the Senate. And the governor turns to me and he says, because he knew what happened a few years earlier on his Emily stuff, okay? And he says, Jesse, I know this is a real big one for me too.
Yeah.
And my mom saw that. I kept it together better than I'm doing now. I can't explain this.
No, I understand. I mean, being able to look back and think of it now in reflection is, I think the moment, has passed, and now you can really just feel how much that was impactful. That's pretty amazing. So looking back on your service, were there any particular lessons that you felt that you learned?
Well, the most important lesson was you can't accomplish anything of significance on your own in the General Assembly. You have to have 51 votes in the House, 26 votes in the Senate, and a commitment from the governor. And then you're right. Then you're right. Because so many times, we argue, this is the right thing. This is the right thing. It's, we're the 49th state in the country.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right,
okay?
right.
Well, when you get the majorities and you get the commitment, then you're right. Until then, it's just an argument. So that's the most important lesson, that you can't do things on your own. You have to work together. And of course, because our caucus is very diverse, that wasn't always easy. Okay? You have a caucus that we had our own Mason-Dixon line. Okay, 40. Right? I'm from Lake County. Might as well be New York City as far as some of these folks in Indiana.
Yeah.
Yet we enjoyed each other. Okay? Even if we were fighting in the caucus. And I didn't have that in any other group that I worked with. The appreciation for the other members' point of view. There was a lot of tolerance in our caucus. And it served, I think, the caucus, but by extension, we were able to get a lot of good things done in our time in the majority. And again, a month ago, seeing my members from our caucus, from the Senate, Republican caucuses, all that political stuff is vanished. People whom I didn't like personally, first name, shake a hand, warmth, genuineness, respect. Everyone who has served, even if they didn't serve together, because there were some newer retirees there that I didn't know until recently, that common bond of service in the General Assembly is the strongest professional bond I've ever had. And now that I'm retired, I'm sure I'll never belong to a group with that kind of identity, and certainly influence, naturally, but more than influence, the bond, common bond, much more so than the judiciary. Although again, I never consider what I did as judge work.
Right.
But it's individual. Whereas, you're sitting at the head as chairman, but I always wanted to get everyone but a good majority behind every bill. When you're a judge, there ain't no committee. You're the one voting. They can appeal you, of course, but it's different. And I really enjoyed the camaraderie of the legislature. I loved those trips to IU, okay?
Yeah.
For the basketball games, football games. I enjoyed going to Purdue, for the games. It was just a great experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have any regrets as a legislator?
No. I don't think I had any regrets.
Yeah, sure. What advice would you give to future legislators or even current legislators?
Well, I understand the dynamics of maintaining majorities, okay? Anyone with power is not in the business of giving it up, okay?
Right.
In fact, power, it literally is taken. It's not given.
Mm-hmm.
So, I read these stories about how they should pass a redistricting commission and put non-political people in charge of the mapping process.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen, okay? Never. Because the people who control the map-making process is not going to give up their power. So it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, even in majorities, pendulums swing, okay?
Yeah.
And you got to remember, you're not always going to be riding high. And that you better remember that the person you step over, okay? And if you take advantage of them, they're going to remember that. So I would suggest they consider, consequences of ruthlessness. Because there will be consequences.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's all about building things. I think we were in a unique position. We were lucky. I was lucky to be down here when the party rose. Because once we got into power, there was so much that we could do, right? Whereas if you were in the majority for forever, you want to kind of maintain status quo because things are running the way you want them. We did a lot. And so I would say, because the community is dynamic, changing, right? We need to keep the laws up to date with what's going on in the communities.
Sure.
The status quo doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Because the underlying people are changing and the issues are changing. And it's hard to get change, when you got dominance, okay? But the Democrats will come back. As hard as it is mechanically to envision it, because again, you just got two large counties and college towns, and they've got their work cut out for them.
Yeah. Okay. What would you say is the most important work of the Indiana General Assembly?
The most important work?
Yeah.
Well, by the Constitution, the only bill that needs to pass is the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So that affects everyone.
Right.
So that's by definition the most important.
Sure.
Okay? The most important thing about a legislator is listening. I can't tell you how many people, early on, I learned this lesson, going to the Legions, going to the VFWs, going to the posts, going to any group, that, and it served me well because I had a disadvantage because I was so young, okay? And I felt I was, I learned a lot at IU, I was just book smart, okay?
Yeah.
But I didn't really know life. So I would sit and listen to these old timers, okay? And they would go on. And I can't tell you how many guys said, or women said, you listen to me, I'm going to vote for you. Just because, not because they got me to pin me down on a position, right? I listened to them.
Yeah.
But in the early part, it was easy because I didn't know a whole lot. Okay? So don't try and pretend to be something you're not.
Sure.
All right? But I didn't realize how advantageous it was to listen to these people who had been around, and then you got them on your side.
Yeah.
And you got them forever. And the other thing is, this is what I guided myself when I was a judge. As much as I dealt with the top people, okay, governors and speakers and powerful lawyers and judges and lobbyists, I always believed that as long as I fulfilled the expectations of Joe and Jane Lake County, and who is that? Joe and Jane Lake County don't have the time to pay attention to the ins and outs of government. They're too busy raising their own families, raising their kids, working, putting food on the table. But they vote. They are active voters. And all they really want, they don't want contracts, right? They don't want favors. They want good schools. They want courts run honestly. They want their streets clean and their parks available for their children to play in. The big stuff, okay?
Right.
And every now and then they're going to pay attention to you to make sure your priorities are those general good government operations. And again, once they know we trust Jesse, you got them. And then you don't want to break their trust. But those are the people that every day when I stepped on the bench, that's what I thought about. That's who I'm performing for. Not the big shots, okay?
Yeah.
That are coming in, all right? Or everyone loves going to the governor's office. There's an aura there, Everyone likes, going to the golf course or hamming it up, right? But that's not the bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
The bread and butter are the anonymous people who you have to earn their trust. And then once you have it, you better not break it.
Sure. Yeah. It makes total sense. What would you say the public does not know about the Indiana General Assembly and how it operates?
A lot.
Yeah.
I think that they would be amazed at how deals get cut in the dark.
Yeah. Okay.
You think, my mom would always joke about how she was raised thinking that it's always about a show of hands, okay?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Hey, Mom, it ain't that way,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah. No.
It's often a couple of people meeting in a coffee shop, right? Or, in a back room, right? And it's amazing the influence that a couple people have in the General Assembly. And even on the budget, you're talking, billions of dollars. Now is it's heck, this next budget, because the economy is doing so well. I think I left it was $30 billion every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think it's close to 40 biennial budget. And you're talking 6 people in a room cutting the pie up.
Yeah.
So do the people think that 6 people, I elected you to be my advocate, Jesse? And it's kind of hard to say, unless you're on that budget committee, and it's we have votes, of course, I always like the committee of a whole in the House. When we have the budget, everyone's a member of the Ways and Means Committee, okay? But that's a controlled vote, okay? I mean, you don't get any Molotov cocktails passing on the committee of the whole. So even though it's theoretically open, it's all controlled.
Right. There's a little hierarchy there in play. Yeah. How has the state of Indiana changed over the course of your lifetime?
I'm disappointed. This COVID thing has really disappointed me. I always believed, you know, the IU, I come from the IU school,
Yeah.
okay? Which is, you know, we do the right thing for the right reasons, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not perfect, the experts aren't perfect,
Right.
right? But they know more than you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, politically, you should use the experts to take the heat,
Yeah.
right? I cannot believe, now we're not as bad as some of the southern states, but we're not much better on our response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And it clearly has been politicized. You know, when IU took a stand and the case went to the Supreme Court, they were affirmed, right? Mandatory vaccines. Thank God.
Yeah.
But then, right off the bat, you know, they're getting bashed by people they shouldn't be bashing for IU doing the right thing.
Sure.
And I can't believe was over 15,000 Hoosiers have died. 750,000 across the country, but 15,000 in Indiana.
Yeah.
That's almost my hometown,
Yeah.
Griffith. 2 years ago, you tell me that was going to happen, I say you're crazy.
Yeah.
It happened,
Yeah.
and it could have been mitigated. But people were more interested in political advantage. And they put people at risk. I can't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems like politics has crept into every aspect of society right now.
And again, to me, the experts are a political ally of yours.
Mm-hmm.
You can blame them. I got to do this because they're telling me this has to be done.
Right.
I believe in your right of independence and all that business, but people are dying here. And that's not breaking through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Very disappointing.
What enduring qualities would you say the people of Indiana still have or hold dear?
Modesty. Okay? Yeah, modesty. We're not flashy. We work hard, okay? We enjoy our families.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Last question then. What do you want the people of Indiana to know about their role in the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, we need more Jane and Joe Lake counties, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there are too many people who expect, you know, they want insight,
Right,
okay?
right.
And they don't see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to be taken care of. Remember, Jane and Joe Lake County are, you know, they don't want the contract, the job, the favor. They want you to do your job right. And we got too many people who are, you know, who are played to, they're pandered to. And then they're only interested in their own well-beings.
Sure. Yeah.
We need to be more common-based, community-based. I hope we get back to that. You would think, you know, when after 9/11, okay, when the country did come together,
Mm-hmm.
it took a tragedy. And this COVID thing is 9/11s every 3 days.
Yeah.
And it hasn't had the same cohesion.
Yeah.
It's divided us. And I believe, you know, eventually we're going to come to terms, but how many people have died is just mind-boggling.
Sure.
And it could have been mitigated.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask about that you want to mention at all, or did we cover the bases pretty well?
I think you did. You did some research on me, so I appreciate that, actually.
Yeah, no, I thought that was that was really interesting, and figured it'd be fun to talk about some extra stuff that
Yeah.
not everything's gonna pop into someone's head, when you're talking. So
No, I've enjoyed this. I don't know how much time we've taken, but I've enjoyed.
it looks like
every part
we
of it.
hit the 3-hour mark, so pretty good. Yeah.